Welcome back to Rewind of the Living Dead. I'm Damon Martin.
And I'm Patrick Guerra.
And Patrick, you have a sly smirk on your face. I can only wonder what that's about. There's people listening at home. We do have a YouTube channel now, so if you want to see our faces, you may say we have faces built for radio.
Oh, yes.
We do have video now, so you can watch us over on our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Rewind of the Living Dead. But you do have a very sly look on your face right now, Patrick. Why is that?
Hardcore fans of this show might notice that we don't review a lot of found footage movies. We just don't. And there's plenty that come out, and there's plenty that I watch. We just don't tend to review them. Today might be evidence of why we don't typically review found footage movies. Now, Damon, truth be told, of the two of us, there's a found footage guy here. His name is Damon Martin. You actually kind of like found footage movies. Like in general, I wouldn't call you a fanatic. There is truly, I think, a subsect of horror fans who love and like are rabid for found footage movies. Today we're talking The Outwaters by Robbie Banfitch. It's getting a lot of buzz. It's getting a lot of comparison to Skinamarink, which is interesting because I actually did go see Skinamarink. Have you seen it yet?
I have, yes.
Okay, so I don't know about you. I wouldn't classify Skinamarink as found footage.
No, I think experimental is really the only way.
That's experimental.
Experimental would be they're not the same genre, but they are experimental films.
And I would classify The Outwaters as probably an experimental found footage movie, but also in some respects, it is at its bones exactly why I wouldn't review so many found footage movies.
Yeah, so I am a moderate found footage fan. I say that because I've seen more found footage films that I like than you have. That's for sure.
Yeah.
The Blair Witch Project, I think I've mentioned on the show many times. I loved that film. That was
Me too.
Much like Scream and a couple others, really reignited my love of horror. I mean, there's a few years in between there, but that was one that I saw in the theater and genuinely scared the hell out of me. Loved that movie. I know you're not a big fan, but I am a big fan. The original Paranormal Activity, I really enjoyed that one. The sequels, not so much, but the first one, really enjoyed it. Really creative, really original vision. I enjoyed that. Another film, Hell House LLC, which I mentioned on our Best of 2022 show when I said films we saw this year that didn't come out this year, and that was one that made an impression on me, and I really enjoyed that. That was a creative, different take on the found footage genre. Now, I will say beyond that, though, there's a lot of bad found footage out there, and I will say that I'm not there's a lot. So when I say a fan, yeah, probably more than you, but I don't know if that really means a lot because you like two of them, I like maybe five of them. So it's not a huge difference in our fandom, so to speak. But I do appreciate the genre for what it can be, and there are some really lazy, bad found footage films where people just feel like, oh, I got an iPhone or I got a camera, I'm going to record, some really bad acting and make a found footage film, and it's going to scare people because the camera's jostling around, there's people screaming in the background. That's not a good found footage film. The examples I mentioned, like Paranormal Activity, like Hell House LLC, where you can do it and do it genuinely creatively and unique. Because while I mentioned Cannibal Holocaust, which is a film that most people kind of take as the first real, prominent found footage film, and that was in 1980, I believe. The real genre didn't explode until the Blair Witch Project, and then from there, everybody was making found footage films. So again, as you said, it's a subsect of our genre in horror, and there are good ones. There are good ones, but
they're out there.
There are some really bad ones as well, and The Outwaters, it was getting all the this last year we heard a couple of films that got a lot of buzz. We reviewed a couple of them on here. Terrifier 2 was a big one. We reviewed that got all the buzz in the world, and then The Outwaters was the new one. Mike Flanagan, a filmmaker you and I have a ton of respect for, created The Haunting of Hill House, Dr. Sleep, all kinds of the Midnight Club. All these different things he's done. He tweeted about it. Basically was like, congratulated the filmmakers on a crazy fever dream or whatever he said about it. And that actually partially prompted us to go ahead and review this film because We have a lot of new films coming out. Scream 6 is coming out. The new Evil Dead movie's coming out. So we do have a lot of new, prominent horror films coming out. But we're like, let's get on this one, knowing full well, Patrick, that we don't typically spend a lot of time on found footage.
And yeah, this long kind of preamble is to kind of point that out, that it's not really our thing. It's okay if it's your thing. We're not here today to tell you should like or dislike found footage movies. Obviously, both of us like some of them, so that's not even the point. And I do actually really respect the genre in this respect. It allows filmmakers with not a lot of money to enact their vision, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. I actually encourage that, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited for Robbie Banfitch that it's getting buzz, because that helps Robbie move to the next thing. That said, the genre itself, and very much the Outwaters, and let's just get into talking about the Outwaters. The Outwaters premise wise is fairly simple. I think it's a group of friends are going to go out to the desert to shoot a music video. Don't ask me how I got to that conclusion. The style of the Outwaters is evidence-based found footage. So they do that right at the front. They give you some title cards and they explain to you that this is recovered footage that they found, and they're just kind of playing it for you raw. And so what you're supposed to be seeing, and the way it supposedly plays out, is just straight raw footage. It's just footage as they saw it, and they're just playing it for you. I couldn't. I don't know where to start, Dave. I don't know where to start, because the first hour of this movie is just a collection of random shots that are building towards them going to shoot this video. Like I picked up enough of that. Like they are on their way to shooting a music video. One, just on its premise alone, I wouldn't have the camera person, whoever's behind the camera. I think the character is Robbie Zagorek, played by Robbie Banfitch. The character of Robbie Zagorek, I would never have hired to shoot a music video. Terrible camera person, like just terrible camera person. So that right on its head, I was like, this is not going to work, because I wouldn't hire this person to shoot my music video. Like it's just a series of random shots. And I was like, and I thought to myself, I was like, maybe if I edited this together, would it work? No, it wouldn't. Like if I cut these images together, would I get something cohesive at some point? No. Like the camera person in this movie is just shooting a bunch of random shit leading up to the chaos that you're waiting for. And I think you and I were doing the same thing. We sat there going, something's gonna boil over at some point. And by the way, there's a lot of great movies where kind of nothing happens and then it finally boils over. I'm not going to say that we'll get into it in spoilers. The Outwaters does boil over. It does happen. It'll get there. But how long it took to get there, Damon, I have a real problem with. And by the way, I don't live in my little vacuum. I go out there and I talk to horror fans and I say, tell me what you liked about this. And I've done it before. I've even called or messaged found footage horror filmmakers that I know personally, and I go, there's some buzzy found footage movie, and I go watch it, and I'm bored to tears, and then I go, so what did you like about that first hour? And they always say the same vague thing. They go, it's just kind of nice to see like the world get kind of set up a little bit. And I feel like they're drinking some fucking crazy Kool-Aid that I am not drinking. Damon, help me, please, help me.
No, see here, my initial thought watching the Outwaters was about 45 minutes in. I thought to myself, this could have been condensed into about 10 minutes.
Yes.
Now, to be fair, I'm like you. I want to understand why other people like this, right?
Right.
I want to. So I went through a barrage of reviews online from both film critics and fans on like Rotten Tomatoes, Letterboxd. Went through a ton of reviews because I want to understand what people like about this. And again, not a ton of people are sitting there talking about the opening, because the second half of the film is where things really amp up and kind of go crazy. So that's what the majority of people are talking about. But I did find a few reviews where they said that the first 45 minutes to an hour is great character development. And I said, really? Because I didn't really learn anything about these characters. It was just a lot of weird close-ups and a girl singing at one point, and like just weird, like just again, it was just a collection of clips, like you said, like it wasn't a narrative bit of storytelling. And I understand the idea you're trying to get with this film is it's found footage. This is just the memory cards recovered from the cameras, and they're playing them to you raw. Well, guess what? In that way, I'll say this film executed that perfectly, because it's just what you would imagine random collection of filmings would look like, because there's no story. Like, there's no narrative in the first 45 minutes. That's why I said, like, you could condense it all down to 10 minutes and I would get the same effect in this movie. And here's the difference. When you compare this, let's just put it out there right now, Patrick. The Outwaters, in at least the first hour to hour and 10 minutes of this movie, is almost a, I don't want to say rip off is the wrong way to say it, because I don't mean that, because obviously being an homage
Okay.
The proper way. This is straight up an homage to the Blair Witch Project. The first 45 minutes to an hour of this film.
I'm going to push back hard right now. It's not even an homage, and I'll tell you why. Because the run up to, and I know where you're going with this. I'll let you get back to it. But the run up to the horror in the Blair Witch Project is that they're setting up a documentary, and they make it clear. They make it like crystal clear what they're doing. And so this is not that. This is just exact. You said it so perfectly. It's a series of random shots and weird close-ups, and I don't learn a hell of a lot about these people other than I think the lead singer's mom died. That's about the biggest thing I learned.
Yeah.
Anyway, please continue, because I do agree with you that I do believe Robbie Banfitch was trying to homage the Blair Witch Project. I don't think Robbie did it. So,
no. He 100% did not succeed. I'm just saying, like, the first hour, that's what I got from this film.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between this and the Blair Witch Project, and they're vast, so let me just be clear about that. But the biggest difference early on, we talk about character development and setting up the narrative for your movie, is that the Blair Witch Project, 20, 25 minutes in, you've met these people, these three filmmakers. They've gone to this little town called Burkittsville. They've interviewed a couple of people. It's kind of creepy. It's in black and white. And then right away, when you get into the actual woods part of it, things just continue to escalate in that film. Even 20 minutes in, weird noises, little things, in the camp, and they find these stick figures. It just keeps escalating in the Blair Witch Project.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just continues until you get that famous shot of Heather Donahue in the tent with the thing right on her face. She's crying, weeping. It just brilliant the way they execute, because everything escalates in that movie. One event escalates to the next event until you get to the end, and by the end you're on the edge of your seat, screaming at the theater, screaming at the screen. I can't believe this is happening.
Mm-hmm.
The first hour of this film, there's none of that. There's no escalation. There's no peril. There's no storyline setting up the grander story. There's none of that. And then when you do get to the quote-unquote exciting incident, what kind of sets this off, I still don't know what that is, Patrick. It just went haywire, and I don't know why. Because, again, there's so much of this film that feels like they were trying to do their own Blair Witch Project. They just didn't succeed in any way, shape, or form setting it up, much less the execution later in the film when you actually get to the horror. And I still have no idea. And I understand maybe that's the idea, is that there's not an answer as to why these things are happening, and that's fine. But it's such a dramatic switch in this film. And yes, there's a tiny bit of build-up, but then it just goes wacky, and it just goes full on, like, I took acid, I'm in a fever dream. And I was like, what in the hell am I watching? Also, listen, I'm not a filmmaker, but you're a filmmaker, Patrick. You made films, okay? So this is my completely amateur version of filmmaking.
Sure.
The biggest second half of this film, no spoilers, a big part of this film takes place with a little spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like a pin light, right? Like it's like 2 inches wide. My first thought, and I understand they're trying to hide things, they're trying to make you scared. I understand all that. But it's so purposeful and so blatantly obvious what they're trying to do that my first and last thought of this movie was, did no one think to bring a fucking flashlight Like, it is like the worst version of this like found footage thing where it's like this little pin light. It literally looks like a laser pointer almost.
I mean, they did bring a flashlight. It's one of those tiny ones.
But
They
that's what
they
I'm
they
saying. Like,
show it. Yeah.
it's so bad that my thought was you're going camping and the light is so pinpoint. Like, it's literally a little 2-inch wide version of a light. And immediately I called bullshit because I'm like, no one would go to the middle of the desert and shoot a video with all this equipment and you're shooting it with a pin light. You're gonna have flashlights. You're gonna have much brighter lights. I have a ring light in front of me right now, Patrick, that's like 1,000 times brighter than anything they brought there. You're telling me you don't bring any of that and you don't have any kind of I know that sounds like a weird quibble to have with this movie, Patrick, but like my problem is like if you're going to give me a found footage movie, you're going to say these are filmmakers out there making a music video, but they didn't prepare for any kind of lighting whatsoever. I know they're in the desert, but like
Yeah.
nothing. You didn't bring a flashlight. You didn't bring anything. And so, like, the second half of the film spends the entire time filmed from the spotlight that is so unbelievably annoying because you're like, they want to get you with the jump scares, right? Like, they want to get you with like the ooh, there's a noise over here and what's coming from this
Yeah.
direction and blah blah blah. At least like in the Blair Witch Project, like they had like almost like night vision. Remember that film? Like it was like night vision. You saw the woods, like you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, you could see. Yeah.
You have a camera. I have a camera. Every camera on Earth with a light lights up more than this film lit up anything. I know that's a weird complaint, but that was one of my biggest complaints because I'm like, how would you not like? How do you expect me to believe that you're a filmmaker out making a film and you have this is your only light is this little pin light that you have in here? And it's just I'm sorry, it's just that really annoyed me because then you're just suspending disbelief and saying I should just believe that you have no idea what you're doing as a filmmaker and you're going to bring a pin light to light the entire desert. Rant over. Sorry.
How about this, Damon? I'm gonna come to Robbie's defense right here, because the character of Robbie Zagorak is a terrible filmmaker. Like, I'm not saying Robbie Banfitch is, and Robbie Banfitch is a successful filmmaker, and Robbie Banfitch made a movie that we're here talking about on our podcast. But Robbie Zagorak, the character, is a terrible filmmaker. Of course, he would not be prepared for what you need in the desert. That's the one thing that is set up very well, is that they are going to shoot a music video with a filmmaker that is woefully ill prepared to make a music video, like woefully ill prepared. I saw a lot of comparisons to what's his name now it's Toby, not Terrence Malick. Terrence Malick movies, by the way, Terrence Malick movies are not terribly entertaining either, but the idea that, well, this is a filmmaker sort of catching the moment and sort of seeing what's happening out there. Terrence Malick movies are shot by Chivo. I can't remember his full name. An incredible Lubieski. I'm butchering his name. This guy Chivo is one of the best cinematographers who's won every award on the planet. Those movies look beautiful. This movie does not look beautiful, and the filmmaker Robbie Zagorak is an awful filmmaker. Of course he wouldn't have the proper lighting or anything like that. Like, that's the one thing that was made clear to me for the first hour of the movie was, what's scary about this movie is that they're trying to make a music video with someone who doesn't know how to make one. That's terrifying, because I've made a lot of music videos over the years. They're incredibly difficult to make, and you got to sort of have a plan coming in. It's so clear that Robbie Zagorak has no plan coming in, because everything that Robbie is shooting is just, it's like, how would one thing trim to another thing? And then they start getting into the music video, and there's a couple of shots where I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting and creative a little bit. A little bit. But I was like watching that part of it, and my filmmaker brain's going, this won't cut together. This won't be a music video. It won't work as a music video. It's impossible. It won't happen.
Yeah.
So I will defend Robbie there, is that he clearly sets up in the movie that Robbie Zagorak is a terrible, unprepared filmmaker.
But to that point, I don't want to keep harping on the light thing, but like a lot of much like the Blair Witch Project, you know, like again, the Blair Witch Project is set up as a documentary. They're a documentary crew going out to film evidence or to do a documentary on the Blair Witch, the myth of the Blair Witch. And so you understand why they have cameras rolling at all times. That's kind of what they're doing. They're documenting, and they set that up literally in the first shot. When you
Yeah,
meet the
it's
characters, they set that up.
very swift.
This one is just a weird one where they're just like, we're filming each other, we're filming everything. And listen, I've been on road trips where I've filmed with friends and done stupid things in the car, and I'm not knocking that because that is very common. But going back to, I'm sorry to keep harping on the lighting thing, but like in this, like they're not shooting a documentary. They're shooting a music video. So first off, you've already set yourself up for why are we filming 24 hours a day? They don't ever
Yeah.
they don't ever really explain that. I'm not saying you have to explain. I'm saying like you never really get the feeling that this guy is just that he's just your friend who loves to film everything and put together weird videos of his friends. And like you just never get that sense about Robbie the character, not Robbie Banfitch, the actual filmmaker.
Yeah.
Two, when I talk about the lighting, and I'm just gonna my last comment on the whole lighting thing, Patrick, is this: you're not filming the music video at night, right? Like you're not filming your friend doing the music video. So there's a point in this movie. This is not a spoiler. It kind of is, but it's not. They start hearing weird noises. Let's just leave it at that. They start hearing
Sure.
weird noises. Again, very Blair Witch Project. You hear noises out in the woods you want to look in. In this case, it's the desert. When they open up the tent and they look out, and once again, you're either dealing with complete pitch black darkness or you're dealing with a little pin light. You're not filming for your This is not a documentary. This is for a music video. So why are you opening your tent up and putting the camera out there without like using your? At this point, not in 1999, they didn't have this. We do now. Using the light from your cell phone, for Christ's sake. Like it's just. To me, the reason why this bothers me so much, Patrick, in this particular instance is because they're ignoring the technology of our time for the sake of trying to make things creepy and scary, and it doesn't work. You have to remember you're playing to a smarter audience in 2023, guys. Like, we all understand, like, okay, so you don't have cell phone signal in the middle of the desert to call for help, but you can't use your flashlight to light up and see that there's some creepy shit going outside of your tent. It's just it's such a like it boggles my mind because it's when you're it's going back to the old slasher trope that they bring up in Scream that is so brilliant, the original Scream, when they say like the girl should be going out the front door instead of running up the stairs.
Yeah.
You're making it blatantly obvious when you do things in certain choices, and part of the smart strategy and execution of a film like Scream is they acknowledge all that, and they acknowledge like it's always this, it's this. Like they kind of make fun of the old '80s slashers where like the final girl or the girl getting murdered always makes the wrong choices, and we joke on this show about that Geico commercial where they're like the kid's running from the killer, and they're like, why don't we just get in the running car? And they're like, are you crazy? Let's stand behind this wall of chainsaws. Like that's just like bad, decision making in films. We are a smarter audience in 2023, Patrick. We understand technology. We understand the decision. So when someone makes you've criticized films in the past, and even though I've defended them to a certain extent, you've really criticized a lot of films in the past for bad decision making by the characters. One film in particular, I'm not going to get into the particulars, but one film last year that I actually really enjoyed was Barbarian, and the choices made by the characters bugged me too. But I got beyond it because the film, in my opinion, was still really good. But it drove you insane that these characters just made mind-boggling, stupid decisions. And that's kind of where I'm at with this film. And again, I'm using the lighting as an example, but it's a much broader problem, is that they're just asking you to believe they make all of these weird decisions for no apparent reason. And then when the actual terror, let's say, picks up, it just happens. There's no reason there, and I understand like the point, like they're trying to. It's an art film, and it's that you're not supposed to fully understand it. But if you're gonna make that film, then just show that. Just show weird images, and you're just making an art film that you're gonna put in like the you're gonna show at the art museum. What's the Andy Warhol museum? Where it's
MoMA.
With weird images and spliced together, video, whatever. Do that. Don't try to sell me that this is a found footage horror film when it's 50 minutes, hour of build up of characters that we never really care about. Don't like their decisions. They're just out there in the middle of nowhere, and to your point, going back to the whole music video thing, I didn't understand they were filming a music video until literally the point in the movie where the girl is walking through the desert with a dress on, singing to herself with wind so loud that I had to mute my TV. And then at that point, I understood they're trying to shoot a music video.
Yeah. No, I picked up on the whole music video thing probably because I'm a filmmaker and so I was like, oh, okay, that's what they're up to. But let's circle back to something that you said earlier, which made total sense. This movie did not need to be an hour and 40 minutes long. It could have been a solid hour. Now, I have my thoughts about a lot of found footage movies, but one that I will always endorse, even though it's not my cup of tea, is Host. They made not even a 60-minute, it was like a 57-minute horror film. And Jed Shepard, which is a name that you may hear soon on the podcast, I won't tell why yet, but he said normalize making hour-long horror films. If we were talking about the Outwaters as an hour-long horror film, we'd have a lot less to complain about. A lot less to complain about. The first hour of this movie, and I clocked it, you know me, Damon. Since day one on this podcast, I clock things. And I was getting frustrated with this movie. Shit does not really truly hit the fan for an hour, for 1 hour. There's like one little hint, and you brought up the Blair Witch, is that they pretty much establish dread and escalate it from the beginning of the Blair Witch. They don't do that in this movie. They wander. It's stream of consciousness. The first hour is a selection of random images and musings from a couple of people that are not terribly interesting. That's how Robbie Banfitch presented it to us. That's not my criticism of it. That's an objective look at those people. They're not very interesting characters, and he does very little to make them seem interesting. So the first hour could go away. You could do a 10-minute setup and have a 40 minutes of what happens in the spoiler section. And I've been like, cool, they did it. Whether I liked it or not, regardless, but I'd be like, they did it. What this movie did, and what a lot of found footage does, is has an agonizing amount of preamble. An agonizing amount of preamble that did not make my experience better. So I spend the first half of this podcast criticizing this movie because and I say this all the time. I don't see us as reviewers. I see us as fans who sit down and watch and talk about the movies that we love together because we love horror films and I just want to talk about them. Well, that's my experience as a viewer. It's not my review. It's not me saying like, film theory says blah, 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 blah. No, I'm sitting down. I'm watching my horror film. And for the first hour, I'm utterly bored. And I don't care what like all the glowing reviews say from like fans. The fans are going, oh, it was amazing for the first hour or so of cinema verite. They're reaching and they know it. But it's groupthink, and we all do it. And the horror community has that problem where it's just like we can't constructively criticize. And I do believe you and I are very constructive. Like we can just shit on something, and we've done it in the past where we just purely shit on something. That's not what we're doing here. I'm saying I'm a viewer. I'm sitting there, and for the first hour of this movie, I am bored to tears. Bored to tears. You did not impress me with anything you did in the first hour of this movie. I'm sorry. Like that's my experience as a viewer. That's not me saying something outrageous to get clicks. We don't play that game on Rewind of the Living Dead. We do this so that when our fans and listeners tune in and they're debating like what they want to do, I'm gonna offer you up a suggestion. People listening that are thinking about seeing the Outwaters, fast forward the first 50 minutes. You don't miss a thing. Am I wrong?
No, you're not. And to that point, real quick before we get to spoilers, we need to get to spoilers so we can talk about the biggest section of this film and get into categories. But one other thing I'll mention, you mentioned Host as an example. Here's when I talk about found footage films that get it right. Here's what I complimented Host before, and I'll compliment it. And again, I'm not comparing this film to Host. They're different films. They're both found footage films,
Yeah.
but they're different kinds of films. Here's where I applauded Host and loved it. We talked about like you embracing your time,
Mm-hmm.
embracing the technology of the time. What Jed Shepard and the team behind Host, what they did was is they used an unusual situation, being the pandemic, where we're all stuck in our own houses, couldn't go anywhere, couldn't do much of anything, and you're talking to people on Zoom and Skype hours a day for meetings or work or just to communicate with each other. And so he took that and created a very unique found footage experience of a group of friends, conducting a seance over a Zoom call, for lack of a better way of explaining it. That's the simplistic way of explaining Host. Whether you like the film or not, I'm not getting into like the love or adoration or even the criticism of that film. What I'm saying is that was such a creative, unique take on the fact. That's what I applauded about that film,
Mm-hmm.
is that, oh, this is a found footage film, but it's so different than
Mm-hmm.
anything I've seen before, and they used they used their surroundings in such a brilliant way.
Mm-hmm.
Zoom calls. We're all stuck inside during the pandemic. We
Yeah.
all lived through it. Wow, that's a really cool, creative way to make a horror film. I'd never seen anything like that before. Wow, great job. This film rehashes and basically, again, when I say homage, they basically try. The first hour is just a full on, we're making Blair Witch in a desert, is more or less what they're trying to do, and failing spectacularly at doing the same thing. And then when it gets into, so let's get into spoilers, Patrick. So be fair warning, The Outwaters is in theaters. It's also available on Screambox, which is another horror streaming service run by Bloody Disgusting. Screambox is the site. Now, again, credit to Screambox. I've used the service before. It's not a knock on them. They got a million films over there, so I want to make sure, like, support horror streaming, Shudder, Screambox, all these horror services. Please go out and support them, because that's how we continue to get great horror films, even the ones that you and I don't like. So let's get into spoilers, Patrick. So the fever dreams that starts like an hour and 10 minutes into this movie, where we go from these weird echoing booms outside the tent to a couple of weird shadowy images where you see a dude holding an axe in the middle of like a
Mm-hmm.
horizon, and then explain to me what you are an art movie fan.
Yeah, I am.
You are an art movie. You have to explain. I'm dumb. You have to explain things from time to time what I'm witnessing. Patrick, explain the last 35 minutes of The Outwaters to me.
I'm having trouble. So, truth be told, I think somebody called it because I asked around. I go, if you liked Outwaters, hit me up. Let me know why. And one person said it was Lovecraftian in its chaos and its grotesqueness. And you could say that certain Lovecraftian stories are chaotic, maybe a little bit. And so I think at that hour 10 mark, we just descend into some other unknown, ununderstandable hellscape with very little video skills to actually like document what's happening. So this very unskilled filmmaker, Robbie Zagoric, like passes through. I'm assuming like there was a couple of like pulsing lights in the distance at some point. Passes through into some other hell world and is stuck between time and space, because at some point I do see him looking out at him and his friends like trying to make a music video on the dry lake bed. So I think he's passed through some sort of dimension, and all chaos ensues, and that's fine. Like, okay, like I'm in, like now the blood is starting, now the creature feature is beginning. But it's so hard to kind of follow. And I'm okay, by the way. You don't need to handhold me and explain why. But at one point, he kind of does. Like at one point, the camera, whether it was upside down or not at the point, I can't remember. But there was a point when the camera pointed towards a restricted area, do not enter zone. Do you remember this?
Yes.
And then next to it, very conveniently, right next to the warning sign, is a gas mask. So I was like, oh, so now there's sort of like an implication of like the mist, kind of like maybe there was some sort of military experiment that happened here, and it reached into another dimension, and so now we're kind of homaging, to say politely, the mist, I guess. Is that's now we know what it's like actually being there in the mist, I guess, is where Robbie's going with this. Unfortunately, it's just too chaotic, too dark, too hard to see. If you really want to, play that game, I'll play with you. Theater of the mind. Imagine what's happening instead of seeing it. Okay, that's fine. Do it. Like I can't criticize this section of the movie because it is so surrealistic. But I will say that like why this section of the movie where the character of Robbie stumbles through hell doesn't land with me is because I was so absolutely exhausted from the first hour of the movie that it didn't matter that I got to this point. I was over it. It wasn't like, oh, cool, now we're into the cool stuff. If we'd gotten 15 minutes of whatever else that was for the first part of the movie, and then got into this, I'd be like, well, that's interesting. But now we were just in this just fever dream. And by the way, we use that term a lot. Having a fever dream is awful. It's an awful experience to be so delusional that you're like, from sickness, that you're like seeing things like that's not necessarily a good adjective.
Yeah. So let me try in my own backwards way of explaining like the struggles I had to the second half of this film, because I read a lot again. I read a lot of reviews and I read interviews with Robbie Banfitch and tried to understand what he was doing. And it's a collection of a lot of disturbing imagery. There's blood on hands. There's bloody images of his friends. There's this weird guy with an axe that you see, and you're wondering what's going on there. They record these weird sounds in the middle of the desert, and it's this weird squealing sound, like this weird, like high pitched, kind of squealing sound. There's these like tentacle snakes that kind of take
These
part
like
in this
little
movie.
mini tremors
Yeah,
worms.
yeah, like worms, and yeah, they look like intestines running at you. Like they're bloody intestine looking worms, and they're running at you, and it's a lot of screaming, intense ruffling, and it's just a lot of like it's sensory overload in that
Yeah.
moment, and none of it makes sense. Like again, I understand that maybe I'm the boring one, Patrick. Maybe I am the boring one that wants to like get a linear storyline so I can understand what I'm watching, or at least at the end, like let's say when you get those kind of cobbled together stories, like let's say a Pulp Fiction, or movies that aren't linear, but like by the end you understood what you just watched, right? Like they were all kind of put together, not in a linear sense, but when it's all over, you understood what you just watched. Um, I got none of that here. I got none of like when it was over, I was just like, thank God. I have no idea what I just watched. Like it was just the weirdest collection of imagery and sounds, and like a big part of a lot of people who have a problem with found footage films will talk about like the movement of the camera. It makes them sick to their stomach because it's like that.
Yeah.
This one was not even that, because again, because of the pin light effect, you're not even seeing anything. Like you just see little glimpses. There's a lot of like darkness and like just moments where you're seeing nothing, you're hearing nothing, you're just hearing heavy breathing, and then you hear a scream or you see blood, and it's again, this is what I imagine. Like, do you remember? This is a funny one. Do you remember the movie Private Parts by Howard Stern?
Yeah.
You
No,
remember
I know it back and forth. Yeah.
Do you remember the part in the movie where Howard Stern is making a film for college?
Yes.
This weird collection of like women being carried out, like crucified on
Yeah.
crosses and stabbing, and like they're like, "Well, what are you doing?" Oh no.
Yeah.
And then like that's the film, and everyone's like, "Wow!" And he wins the award. That's
Yeah.
what I thought of with this film. Like, what the hell is this? Like, I have no idea what I just watched. And the people who are praising, like, oh, it's a visceral
Yeah.
image of savagery and cosmic horror, and I'm just like, great. If you and to be clear, every time we review a film, we don't give it a positive, our version of a positive review, Patrick. I want to be clear. I never tell anyone not to watch it.
Right,
Go
of course.
There's going to be fans of our show who are going to watch this and say, wow, this was brilliant. I understood every bit of it and I loved it. And I didn't need a linear story to tell me what was happening. I just loved the imagery. Cool. I'm okay with you loving this film. There are people who love this film. Me personally, though, I didn't understand anything like what I was watching. There was no sense of a story in the second half of the film, just a bunch of weird shots and videos and imagery and screams and sounds. And if that's your thing, more power to you. Me personally, I didn't know what I was watching, and by the end, when it got to the final scene and it ended, I was just like, I'm not kidding. My initial reaction was, thank God it's over, because I had no idea, and this is not a film that I'll ever revisit. I have no desire to revisit it. It was confusing, confounding, and frustrating for the entire hour and 40 minutes. The first hour being kind of boring. I didn't know where they were going, what the setup was, what are we getting at? And then the last 45 minutes, I'm just like, okay, well, this is a guy who did a lot of acid and went into the desert and went nuts. I'm just saying, like, from an outside.
Right, sure. Yeah.
Went nuts, and that's what we're watching. We're just watching the inside of this dude's brain when he's fried on acid, is what my thought was.
And what's interesting is I'm on the other side of it in terms of, like, I think I understood the movie like really well. Like, I could pick up on everything Robbie Banfitch was trying to do, but it still didn't matter. It was still very unentertaining. And I know that's shitting on a film or whatever. Like, I try my best to be constructive. I really do. I genuinely, like, I try to mature as best I can as this show evolves on. This is everything I don't like about found footage. This movie is all of that encapsulated in one movie. Because the first hour is frustratingly boring. The second hour is incoherent. Even though I know, and I say incoherent, even though I know what it's about. Like, I explained to you how I interpreted it, and I think that's a fair interpretation. And I bet it's pretty close to what Robbie was intending. But it wasn't entertaining. I'm not going to pretend it was. For me, I'm not going to pretend that it was. I'm not going to try and get style points by saying, oh, there was a really, this is really heavy, deep imagery that invoked blah, blah, blah. It didn't. And you know me. I love the art films. This was not an art film. This didn't have a lot to say. And it was punishing. It was punishing in its pace, and then its payoff was punishing. And so I left it feeling very dirty. Like, I felt like, damn, dude, I want my hour 40 back. Yeah. Like, I really want it back, because the first hour, like, I told you earlier, I'll toss it. It doesn't hold any value. And I'd be hard pressed to sit. I don't know if I could sit with somebody for 5 minutes and have them try to explain to me why the first hour is important. It's not. Like, it's just not. I watched too many of these movies for you to try and convince me of that. It's not. And then what happens in the last 40 minutes of this movie is so incoherent and sort of just another stream of consciousness on a horror level. I could see why somebody would like that. A lot of people do. There are a lot of movies that people love that I don't love, but they have some sort of, like, cohesive story to them that I can at least latch onto or care about, or even if it's not a cohesive movie, it's delivering something that's so profoundly undeniable that I have to go, well, I got to give it credit. It really got me here. It didn't. This movie didn't get me.
Yeah. Let's get into categories, but let's kick things off with our conversation about found footage, because as we said at the top of the show, I'm a bigger found footage fan than Patrick, but overall, in general, I'm still not a huge found footage fan. It's not like a genre that I seek out and I try to watch films just because they're found footage. I've said it on the show many times, I'll say it again now, I'm a slasher fan. I love slasher films, and I will personally seek out even the worst slasher films because I love slasher movies. I don't do that with found footage. So, before we get to any of our other categories, Patrick, let's talk real quick about what makes a good found footage film. Like, what separates a good found footage film? And I mentioned one at the top of the show, the Blair Witch Project, we've kind of raved about, we both love. But another one more recent that we both have seen that I saw last year and you saw more recently was Hell House LLC, which is a film about a group of friends who are going into build their own haunted house in a town, and they use an old dilapidated building, and they're basically building and they're documenting them building this haunted house, and then weird things start happening in this haunted house, and then by the end you realize like a bunch of people died, things went haywire, and you're basically going back through time to see them going through what they're going through to build this haunted house like you would normally go to on like in October around Halloween. You take your friends to a haunted house experience. That kind of haunted house is what I'm saying. Like they're building a haunted house experience. Um, that was probably the most recent found footage film that really blew me away, that I really enjoyed and genuinely scared me in moments. Um, but others, there are, like I said, paranormal. So, what makes a good found footage film, Patrick?
Well, and shockingly, Damon, I watch a lot of found footage movies. I watched the VHS series that's come out over the last 2 years. I mean, the 95 and 99, like I'm up to date on those. I watched Deadstream. You know my thoughts on that. We don't need to hash it out here. I watch a lot of this stuff. But recently, I watched a couple that I actually really liked. One was Lake Mungo. Have you seen this?
I have seen Lake
Okay.
Mungo. Yeah.
I liked Lake Mungo. It's a different kind of found footage movie, and I think it rolls right into why I also liked Hell House LLC, which I watched right after I watched The Outwaters. I know why I like those two. They come from a different angle. So this, The Outwaters was raw footage just shown to you, which is one style of found footage. Lake Mungo and Hell House LLC are mockumentary found footage. They actually like kind of like try to build a fake documentary around the footage you're about to see. There's people that kind of can inject in something else, maybe suggest you or turn you this way or move you that way. So Lake Mungo and Hell House LLC, they really worked for me on that narrative level, like the narrative structure of those. They just worked for me. You know, I'm. It's rare for me to find like a raw footage, found footage movie that I actually enjoy. But I extra enjoyed Lake Mungo and Hell House LLC. But there's something deeper about those movies that I realized why they work so well for me, and a movie like The Outwaters doesn't. Hell House LLC in particular, last night, I'll get to that when I watched it. It plays on base fear. It plays on a fear that I would have in a very realistic sense. So in Hell House LLC, they're creating a haunted house. There's a lot of dark corners. There's a lot of creepy things. There's creepy clowns, right? They play on things that would scare you as a 10-year-old. If you're walking through a dark, dilapidated hotel and you look over there and you see something in the shadows, you get freaked the fuck out. Or if you walk by the scary clown that's fake, oh, don't worry, honey, it's just fake. And then you turn around and it's looking at you. That's just base horror. That's base scary. It really works. It's really like simple and effective. And it's weird how like scares, sometimes the simpler the better. Sometimes that's how they work. We talk about that on the show all the time. Like sometimes a good anticipatory jump scare just works, and like it just sends a fucking shock through your body and you're giddy afterwards. It was just fun. It's just a basic and fun thing. Why a movie like The Outwaters doesn't work for me is that I'm not afraid of passing through to another dimension and entering a hellscape. Like it's not going to happen. And I think the crescendo of VHS 99 was almost a similar story. Did you see that?
I did not see that one actually.
Okay, the final segment of VHS 99 is actually from the filmmaker from Deadstream. Very similar to what you see in The Outwaters, just done on I think a grander scale. I think they show more, but it's the same idea. It's like I'm not like found footage tries to immerse you in reality. It tries to make you believe what you're seeing is real. That's why the Blair Witch was so damn successful. That's why the filmmaker from Cannibal Holocaust had to go in front of an Italian court and explain that they weren't killing people in the jungle. Those movies, found footage, when it's truly effective, tries to bring you into reality, to play on your base fears. So when you have a movie like this, The Outwaters, they're not playing on my base fears. They're playing on cosmic fears in a found footage setting. To me, those things are diametrically opposed. Because in this cosmic setting is, I mean, listen, you and I are cynical that way. We don't believe in some weird other hell dimension, you know, that where things can go wrong like that. So I'm not going to be afraid of that on any base level. but you're trying to set it in a realistic setting. That's why to me it didn't land, and why movies like Lake Mungo and Hell House LLC and Blair Witch do land with me, because they're trying to present it to you as something real, something that could happen to you. That is when, for me, found footage works.
So for me, where found footage works is when you give me something that I haven't necessarily seen before. Because just showing me these are cards or tapes recovered from a crime scene and here's what happened. Okay, great. Why do I care?
Mm.
And I'm not saying like, I'm saying give me a reason to care. I
Yeah.
complimented Host. Creative way of using Zoom with a seance in that part of time where we're trapped inside in the pandemic. Okay, that's a pretty creative use of your surroundings, right? Blair Witch Project, as I mentioned, they were documentarians going into the woods. They were doing a documentary on the Blair Witch, and then shit got real.
Mm-hmm.
Weird, creepy things started happening. Paranormal Activity, which again is I know a film you're not crazy about, but part of what made that film so brilliant was this couple is living in this house. Weird noises are happening, weird things are occurring, and so the husband starts documenting it by film to see if he can capture something on film. Okay, you understand why he's filming everything now. You understand why they have cameras set up and they have a camera in their bedroom. And then when really weird stuff started happening, which I know is a very famous scene where they put down flour on the floor because they're trying to see if something's coming into their room, and you see these steps coming into the room, and then the blanket lifts up and the woman gets dragged out and screams. It's a very dramatic, very famous scene for Paranormal Activity. When that happened in Paranormal Activity, I was like, oh shit, I've never seen anything like this before in a found footage. This is unique and different and very creepy and very creative with how they scare you in terms of a ghost. Essentially in this house it's a demon, but it's a ghost for lack of a better word. And how these things are like, there's the scene where they put down the Ouija board and they rewatch the footage and they see the Ouija board catches fire. Just little things that you haven't seen before that set up the ultimate scare at the end of the film. Blair Witch Project, as I mentioned earlier, they just keep escalating things. At first, it's weird noises. It's weird noises out in the woods and they can't figure out what's going on. Then they find these stick figures all
Mm-hmm.
over the place, and that's all over. And then it just continues to escalate and escalate. Noises. Then they get lost in the woods. They lose their map. That's a terrifying, as you said, a real life terrifying situation you could put yourself in. Imagine
Yes.
how scary you'd be if you're in the middle of a woods you've never been in before. You lost your map. You have no freaking idea where you're going, where to turn. That's terrifying in and of itself. And then on top of that, you've got weird things. And then they had that one morning where they wake up and there's a collection of all their things around the camp house where they like all these things are like, you know, wrapped up, and they're like, what the fuck? And then one of them goes missing. It's just, it continues to escalate and escalate and escalate, get scarier and scarier. Unique, creative stories. Give me something I haven't seen before and give me a reason to care. Just saying that you're
Yeah,
found
that's a big one.
footage, you just saying you're found footage doesn't give me a reason to care. Give me, again, with Blair Witch Project, by the end, I cared about those characters. I cared, and I understood why they were there. They were documentarians
Mm-hmm.
filming a story about the Blair Witch. I understood why they were there. Hell House LLC made sense because they were documenting the building of this haunted house, and they were documenting what they were doing, the work they were putting in, all the things that were going on. And so you understood why they were there, what they were doing. It was a very clear sense of the vision of what was going on. And the scares in that film are unique because, like you said, it's an inside of a haunted house, like a built haunted house, not like a real haunted house, but a built haunted house, creepy corners, clowns, as you said, all those kind of things. Give me something different that I haven't seen before. That's what Paranormal Activity did. That's what Blair Witch Project did. That's what Hell House LLC did. This film, The Outwaters, to go back to the film we're reviewing, did none of that. There was nothing unique. There was nothing really truly creative. If you're going to tell me it's cosmic horror, that's the sense, like you said, well, I can't relate to that. I can't relate to why they're scared or what they're scared at.
Or,
And honestly, just showing me bloody images and screams and a guy holding an axe doesn't scare me. What?
but
What?
you nailed it. Why that cosmic horror didn't land with you is because you never cared about those characters. Now in Host, the seance is super important to Haley. It's super important that they be respectful of it and do it right, because she has some reverence and some fear for it, and her fears start to come true. Documentarians and Blair Witch, they are kind of afraid of these dark woods, and they're afraid of what might happen if they ran into a witch, and that starts to come true. It continues to escalate. Everything in all these good found footage movies you mentioned, we're playing on the fears of the characters. I had no idea that Robbie was scared of weird little tremor snakes. That never connected. It just went from like Robbie's a bad filmmaker to Robbie's being chased by weird snakes and gutting himself. And there was no connection between those things, so I didn't feel for the character of Robbie at the end. It didn't matter because there was no connection. That's if you don't care about these characters, why am I going to care when they're in peril?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And as you said, like with the whole character, last thing I'll say on character development and story. Listen, I understand if they didn't write a script for this film. Well, I could tell that right away.
Now that's very clear.
But like the story, okay, so you just want to get into like the fever dream, hallucinations, all that kind of weird stuff and everything. Okay, great. But like the opening of the film sets the premise up pretty strong in the sense of you hear a 911 call and all these people screaming and the 911 operator like, what's going on? What's happening? And you're screaming and weird all this, and then they set it up in whatever, 2020, whatever year, whatever it was, they set it up like a very, very generic what you've come to expect in found footage. Again, very much like Blair Witch Project. These group of filmmakers went out there. These are the recovered memory cards shown in chronological order, and this is what we found. And it just says card 1, and then you start card 2, card 3. The problem is that by the time you get to what's actually scary, not only do I not know much about these characters, not only do I not care much about these characters, but then you're not even really telling me what happened. You set this whole thing up with this 911 call. Guess what, Patrick? You don't get any resolution on that whatsoever. Like, you don't understand. Like, when did they call 911 and ask for help? When did they, like, at what point did they freak out bad enough to want to call for help? Like, because this all seems to take place over a few days. And the really weird fever dream stuff, like you're not sure, are you in the same day? Or are you going traveling through time? Like you said, there's that one vision where he sees his friends walking through the desert. So did he travel back in time? It's so weird and not put together that I didn't understand it. And as you said, and we've said many times now, is I didn't know enough about the characters to care about the characters. For anyone who's saying there's character development, just show me an hour of friends hanging out is not character development. I didn't care anything about any of these people. I mean, there's a moment, like there's like a 4-minute segment at the beginning of the film where the girl is just singing a song. Is that why I have to care about her? Because she's a singer? Well, I know lots of singers. I don't know if I really care about them that way in a story that you're trying to tell me for a movie.
Yeah, it was not built up in a way that was conducive to caring about these characters. So at the end of the day, all the horror falls flat because there's no connection there. That's how it works for me. If it worked for you, congratulations, but it's not going to work that way for me. Like I didn't care because I didn't know anything about these characters, and that first hour of the movie didn't give me anything to care about.
Yeah, and as I said, you want to make a good found footage movie for me, give me a cohesive story, give me characters I care about, and escalate the terror, escalate the horror. That's the staple of found footage, is escalating the terror.
Can you imagine if I just came up to you with like these weird, very not convincing little bloody snakes that were like, "Oh, are you scared, Damon?" Yeah. You'd be like, What? Yeah, it would be so random that you'd be like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, you got, again, this is supposed to be found footage in a sense of you're following along and you're looking at the world through the image or the lens of the people in this story. And if the things got so weird and bizarre that you just didn't get out or light the turn on a flashlight, anything that would make sense in this moment, then I lose interest because you're just asking me to just follow along and not believe this is real. Like you're not giving me real situations with people, which is what found footage is supposed to be.
So it's supposed to feel reality based.
Like when you look at like Hell House LLC, like you understand why these people, even though weird stuff starts happening, they have a vested interest in this haunted house working. Like they put money into this. Like they can't abandon this project. In Paranormal Activity, they live in this house. It's their
It's
house.
their home.
You're not just going to burn it down and leave because weird stuff's now. This is not full on like Amityville horror. This is like weird stuff happening, but really unexplainable weird things. Not full on. You're opening the toilet bowl and there's blood inside.
They're trying to rationalize in
They're
paranormal
trying to
activity. They're trying to
rationalize.
rationalize the situation.
Blair
Yeah.
Witch Project, you're a documentary group out in the woods and you get lost, you lose your map. Well, then you're really fucked because you have no idea where you're going. You're getting deeper and deeper into the woods. It's this huge area where, people have disappeared before. So all these things make sense. All these things make sense in the good found footage films. This one didn't because not only, again, not to keep banging that drum, but like the characters I didn't know about them. I didn't care about them. Didn't learn much about them. Didn't really care why they were out in the middle of the desert. Okay, you're filming a music video. That's what you're giving me as your reason for being out there. Great. You're filming everything. Okay, I understand. You're documenting. You're documenting your trip to the desert. Okay, great. And then when it just twists and turns into this weird cosmic horror sense of imagery, blood, and snakes and all this, I have no idea how we got here. I don't care how we got there. And you're giving me no reason to feel like I should be in peril other than you're making me sick to my stomach because I'm watching this shaky camera work with a pin light that doesn't show me anything. So yeah, again, unlike the really good found footage horror films, I wasn't invested at all. I was not invested in the least. And when it was over, my only thought was, I don't care that any of these people died. I don't care.
That's the mortal sin of the Outwaters.
Much less do I ever actually know they died. All I thought, one guy.
I don't know.
We don't really know. Did they all die? Like, we're not really sure.
Yeah, but that's the mortal sin of this movie is that you don't care. You don't care that Robbie's in peril. Yeah. You don't. Well, why? Yeah. And you do that, and it's curtains for your movie, at least in my opinion. But hey, Robbie's laughing all the way to the bank. He's got a movie in theaters right now. He's doing just fine. He doesn't need me.
Let's talk about best performance in this movie, Patrick. This is gonna be a fun category. What was your best performance in the Outwaters?
I'm being a total smartass here. Okay. My best performance is the fans who say that this is a genius film. Again, you can like it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that you're wrong for liking this movie. I'm not. It's for the people who are like trying, and some people tried to bend over backwards to explain why they liked it. Like they couldn't even explain why they liked it. And especially the first part, I'm like, please tell me what was interesting for you about the first part. Well, I mean, and you just go, boy, I've never had to struggle that hard to explain why I like a film. So my best performance goes to the fans.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. When I say best performance, I mean, I guess my best performance would be the weird animal tooth at the end of the movie that guts that what Robbie uses to gut himself, because at least it brought us to a conclusion. So I'll say that is my best performance because at least
thank you, Animal Tooth.
Yeah, thank you, Animal Tooth. To your point about the fans, I don't want to knock it, but like I read a lot of reviews on this, trying to understand. And there were a lot of positive reviews, to be honest.
Plenty.
Actually, I would say that this is one I've seen reviews a lot of times where the audience score versus the critic score are different. Like Rotten Tomatoes has that, where you see it and you're like, okay, why? Like the critics gave this like a 90% whatever, and the audience is like 40%. Yeah. Why is there this wide range of opinions? And sometimes I feel like like legitimate film critics, people who do this for a living, I do feel like they get lost in the weeds of filmmaking sometime, and they're not. I don't know that they really like something, but they like the idea of liking something. If that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. Yeah.
So I think that. So like I was reading reviews, and like there was this one review. I'm not trying to like knock the review, so I'm not going to name it. I'm not going to say where I found it, any of that kind of stuff. I just want to use some of the words they used. A mind-breaking, soul-shattering descent into madness. And I was watching this, and it's like a visceral odyssey and like all these words. And my thought with reading these reviews was like, okay, this is just using a lot of words to say nothing.
Yeah. And you know better than me. There are a lot of journalists out there, and in the horror space, I think this exists more, or in the genre space, who know that like they have to give good reviews to movies. So they have to find a way to give a good review to it, because if they give a bad review to a movie, they become like a pariah because we kind of have accepted this idea that we are only supposed to like movies. Now, a general critic, a critic for like the New York Times, they don't have that same worry. But a genre critic for like a micro website knows that like, oh, they might like disinvite me to an event if I say something bad about a movie.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's just again like I just I appreciate if you do like this movie. I do, and again,
sure,
I would never tell anyone not to like something just because I don't like it. That's not what I'm saying. But I think that like again, this feels like a film in a lot of ways. That when I read people who do like it, my first reaction is why, and then when I read the reviews, it's just a lot of that. It's a lot of words. It's a lot of like the cosmic horror, the
yeah.
unshattering, unwavering brutality, and like I'm just like, okay, like you're saying words to me, but it's just I mean, like there's an episode of Friends, not to bring how we talk about Friends on a horror.
Please enlighten
There's
me.
an episode of Friends where Monica and Chandler are getting ready to adopt a baby. They want to adopt it, and they're getting all their friends to write them letters of recommendation to like approve them for this thing. And they get Joey to write one, and Joey feels like he's not very smart, so he learns a trick on a computer, which is the I can't talk the thesaurus key, where
Mhm.
you can pick a word and do the thesaurus and it will tell you other words that make
Right.
it sound like this. So when you read his letter recommendation, it's just like, what was this like? What was this word? What was this line going to be? They have a lot of heart and they're very caring people. And it says something like, the aortic pump that, drives blood through the veins, shows a lot of compassion through other mammals. Like he literally used the thesaurus on every single word, and it's the most bizarre collection of words. That's what I feel like people are like jumping through hoops trying to compliment this movie by using a lot of just powerful words. And as a guy who has an English literature degree, that's like I understand. My professors in college used to call it like you're breaking out the $5 words versus the 25-cent words. And when I was learning about journalism, one of my professors I adored in college when we were first doing like first year journalism stuff, he said, remember you're playing to your audience. The general audience out there does not want to have to stop reading your article to go look up what a word means.
Hmm.
They're not going to do it. They're going to get confused. They're going to move on. Now, there are places for those words in
Sure.
journalism, absolutely. But if you're writing a general news story about whatever you're covering, a basketball game, a football game, whatever, you don't want your language to get so flowery that your audience tunes out because they have no idea what you're talking about. They don't know the words you're
Yeah.
using. You're just busting out $5 and $10 words for the sake of sounding smart, and that's kind of what I feel like this film is. It's a lot of like weird imagery and weird explanations and all these different things, and none of it makes sense to me. And I don't want it's I've said this on the show many times when there's like again films that don't make sense to me and I don't understand what they're going for. I don't want to have to stop and look it up when it's over. Like what did I just watch? I don't want to have someone explain it to me. And this film in particular, because you can't explain it to me, Patrick. You can sit here and say it was alternate dimensions and hellscapes. So you can use fancy words, but at the end of the day, it still really makes no sense.
One of my favorite tweets in a long while was, "You don't have to defend the liking a bad film. If you like a bad film, just say I don't give a shit. I loved it." I would respect a reviewer who just comes out and goes, "You know what? This is not one of those great films, but boy, I had a good time watching it." There's nothing wrong with that. To try and bend over backwards to explain why a film is good, when truth be told, it's like A, either I wanted to make sure I give it a good review so I don't get blacklisted, or B, I think it's a shitty movie, but I like shitty movies. That's a totally valid way to talk about something. Just lean into the fact that okay, yeah, this movie wasn't so good, but I loved it anyway. I totally respect that.
I just watched the slasher movie from the 80s that I had never seen before. It's called Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. It was on Joe Bob's show on
Yeah.
Shudder, and then I watched the movie outside of that as well. And it's got Pauly Shore
Oh,
in like his first movie role. It's got Morgan Fairchild, if you remember her.
yes.
Um,
Classics.
couple of names in there, and it is a unbelievably cheesy and just like bad 80s slash. I mean, there's a dude in here doing kung fu. They literally get into a kung fu fight in the middle of this movie. But it's awesome. I
Right.
loved it because it's so
Right.
cheesy and so 80s and so terrible that I absolutely adore this movie. Like I loved this film. But I'm not pretending it's anything more than what it was.
Could you imagine if I was like, Terrifier 2 is a grotesque dive into the darkness of our spirits? No, it's just a fucking hardcore slasher and there's lots of brains and guts in it, and that's fucking fun.
Yeah, like
That's all you got to say.
I don't need to sit here and defend Phantom of the Mall as brilliant filmmaking. It's a fun, cheesy 80s slasher. I just love it.
Phantom of the Mall.
I can't sit here and tell you that it was like the greatest filmmaking experience ever, or Malls. I look at Malls in a totally different way now, Pat. No,
Chopping Mall was a deep commentary on consumerism in the no, it's fucking rad. Some guy's head explodes.
Yeah,
it's okay.
I just enjoyed the movie. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it was a cinematic masterpiece, but I loved it. Yeah. Let's move on to most annoying character, and can I just go ahead and say all of them? But what is the most annoying character in the Outwaters, Patrick?
This is where the Outwaters truly shows its found footage chops, because every found footage movie has this character. The most annoying character is the camera guy. In this case, it's Robbie Zagoric, but it's always the camera guy. Every found footage movie has to have somebody who, for some reason, will not put the fucking camera down. Now, to the credit of the Outwaters, they never bother explaining why that camera's up. I love it. I fully endorse that. Forget about explaining why you need to keep rolling. It's one of my biggest problems with Paranormal Activities. They have this 5-minute conversation about why he needs to keep recording. It's the most annoying thing you will ever see in a movie. They skip that in the Outwaters. That still doesn't mean that the camera person isn't incredibly annoying. And that goes all the way up to a movie like Cloverfield. The camera person in Cloverfield is played by T.J. Miller, who plays like the annoying, obnoxious friend. That is just who the annoying character in found footage movies are. Deadstream, great example. Deadstream is it's one of the most annoying characters I've ever seen in my life. It is literally one of the most cringe-inducing characters I've ever met. But that is what found footage movies do. Outwaters does it. Camera guy, totally annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say camera guy only because like that's the only real character you spend any time with. And again, I'm a little unlike you. I do like to understand why they're filming, not why they're why they're filming, not they're filming a music video.
Just don't explain it to me.
Yeah, like they're filming a music video. Are you doing a documentary behind the scenes and that's why you're filming everything else? You hear these weird sounds, that's why you're filming. Like, again, in Paranormal Activity, they're trying to document. I agree. You don't need to explain it, but you understand why they're trying to document this weird shit that's happening in their house. Blair Witch, they're literally a documentarian. They're a documentary.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's what they're doing. So you understand, because again, at some point in these bad found footage films, you're just like, why would you not put the camera down and stop filming and get the fuck out?
Yeah.
Like, why would you not do that? Like, why are you still recording? Because again, that's where you're asking me to just suspend disbelief.
Right.
And believe that in a moment of peril, that's why movies from the outside looking in work, because you're not meant to live through the character's eyes. Every found footage film, you're living in the character's eyes. You're living through them. So again, when you're in this moment, you're like, why would you still be filming this? Like, why are you still documenting you're cutting off your own penis? Like, that happens in this film, and I'm just like, why? Like, at some point, if you just descended into full on madness, wouldn't you just drop the camera and move on? Like, it just doesn't. So yeah, I'll agree with you. It's the annoying camera guy, because in this film in particular, it makes no sense why they're documenting what they're documenting. It makes no sense, and especially when it gets into the weird full on LSD acid trip fever dream. Does it make any sense why they continue recording? And you say, well, he's just a filmmaker. That's what he does. Great. But it doesn't make any sense. And to be on top of that, he's a shitty filmmaker.
Yeah. That's the most annoying part, is that if I was the editor and he handed me that footage, he goes, cool, can you cut that together in a music video? I would take the camera and smash it. I go, you're not allowed to do, because he didn't even collect like good good footage
Yeah,
that could actually be cut together into something.
it's like the scene in Billy Madison where Adam Sandler gives that meandering answer, and the guy overseeing the debates like, we are all dumber for having listened to that. It's like that would be my reaction. This dude hands me that footage, I'd be like, I am now dumber for having to watch this footage.
Yeah, it was terrible footage.
Uh, best scare, Patrick, and best gore. Let's just kind of combine these because was there a scare? And I guess there was one bit of gore. I guess.
Well, I was going to originally omit the category, and then when we were texting about it, you said, "Oh, we could do scare and gore." So I left scare in there, but it's a big question mark. So I was curious, do you have a best scare?
No.
Okay.
No,
I was just checking. You mentioned it. I was going to literally leave best scare out because I was like, there's no scares in this movie.
The reason I mention it is this is a horror movie podcast, Patrick. There should be scares. Guess what? I wasn't scared.
Yeah, we've certainly run into movies that are like not even remotely scary, but they're fun horror movies, but we didn't get that either.
This wasn't like, it wasn't scary, and again, all the weird imagery and the snakes and the blood on the hands and the women showing up with blood all over them. I'm just like, okay, great. Like, again, I felt like that. I literally felt like I was watching that Howard Stern student film, Private Parts, where I'm just like, oh, great. It's just weird sounds and imagery, stabbing and blood, and okay, great. And I'm sorry. Listen, Robbie Banfitch, buddy, I hope you go on and do great things. I hope
absolutely.
But I'm sorry, I'm not your audience. I'm just not your audience.
If he's going to make another movie like that, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to do it. How about this? I will give Robbie one serious credit, and this is, I was impressed with the sound design. Sound design is incredibly hard to do. It's so hard that I don't do it. I have other people's sound design for me because I don't want to deal with it. It's a lot of work. The sound design in this movie is good, but way too many wet sounds. At some point, it was like, I'm disgusted and not in a good horror way. It's like, just stop with the wet sounds. It's so like, it was off-putting, but like, I feel like that's giving it credit for like being good. It was off-putting as in that I wanted to turn it off. And like, I don't want to hear your wet sounds anymore. Like, it's getting annoying.
Well, that and the desert scene with the wind, I was like, can we just turn it down a notch here, please? Like, I understand you're trying to get it
Welcome to every sound man's nightmare.
Yeah, it was bad. So best gore, I mean, there was one kind of gory scene, and it was the ending, and I mean, again, thanks for the animal tooth for putting us out of our misery with this one, but yeah, that was the one gory scene.
Best performance, animal tooth.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about the best gore, like the one scene that had the gore?
Yeah, I think the best gore scene was he does find this animal tooth, which to me it looked like a shark tooth. I don't know if you picked up on that or not, but I'm kind of like a biology, like, amateur buff, and I was like, that's a shark tooth. It clearly, why it's out in the desert, I couldn't tell you, but he picks it up and starts to cut into himself, and then the next shot is his dick falling on the ground. So he cuts his own dick off, and I was like, oh, okay. Cut your own dick off. I get, it's a great time to show off your dick, basically, but just do it in a clever way where you remove it from your body and place it on the ground so that people don't think it's exploitative.
Yeah, he guts himself and then walks away, and his intestines are falling out, and that's how the movie ends. Like, it was just the weirdest.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's gore, but yeah, I don't know. Again, it's gore.
Again, if I just walked up to you with like stuff, I go, look, it's bloody. You'd be like, yeah, so.
Yeah.
But isn't it scary?
Yeah.
No.
One of our newer categories we're going to talk about right now, Patrick, and I have a feeling I know where we're going here. Remake, sequel, or leave it alone. So this is a category where we basically take a film, we look at it, and we say, should they remake this film, should they sequelize this film, or should they just leave it alone? The Outwaters, Patrick. Remake, sequel, or leave it alone?
This is a very difficult question to answer because there should be a fourth one, which is like, get rid of it. Just let's pretend it didn't happen.
You just ruined my secret fourth category. I was going to say, here's the secret fourth category. Don't make this movie.
I feel bad because that's like just being fully shitty. I don't know. Remake it as a non-found footage movie. Like, let me be fair, right? Like, if you're gonna go with this, then make a non-found footage movie out of this, and let me see where it goes from there. Maybe that would help with the cosmic aspect, the cosmic horror aspect. is to actually have a more subjective camera as opposed to an objective camera. The objective camera and the cosmic horror, they don't mix, in my opinion. For me, it just totally didn't work.
Yeah, I would say the same. In all seriousness, like if you're gonna do it, remake it and fix the issues that I have with this film. First off, make a script because that's gonna
Yeah,
your
write a script.
structure.
Yeah,
Make a script so you actually have structure to this film. Take the first 45 minutes, whittle it down to 15 minutes. Give me reason to care about these characters. And then if you're gonna do, and I agree with you in principle, this would work better as a film, as you said, like just a regular film, not found footage. And you can still make these people like they're out in the woods, they're out in the desert
yeah.
making a music video.
The premise could, yeah,
You're just not looking at it from their perspective. But if you want to keep this as a found footage film, fix the problems with your found footage. As I said, the little technological advances that you're just ignoring, like having a flashlight, using your phone light, not just using this weird pin light thing out in the middle of nowhere, and then
being a better camera person,
being a far better camera person. Like all these
yeah.
little things that just make no sense, that you're just doing it to discombobulate your audience. You're just doing it to, like, you're just like the shaky camera work, the pin work with the pin light, whatever, all that kind of stuff. Make a more believable found footage film. Like that would be the remake for me. Is like if you want to descend into this full on fever dream of madness in the second half of the film, give me something worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want to give me a story, you don't want to explain the story, you just want to make this just collection of violent images and all these kind of things. Okay, fine. But give me a reason to watch it, because there's so much of this film just shrouded in darkness and this pin light thing where you're just seeing little flashes of a bush or little flashes of the horizon. There's no moment in this film where I'm just like, okay, I kind of get what they're going for here. No, it was just a collection of weird images thrown together to kind of make me feel sick to my stomach, I guess. I guess that was the point. So remake it in a way that's actually cohesive. Give me a real story. And again, if you don't want to explain why they fell into this fever dream, great. But at least give me some reason why I care about these characters falling into a fever dream.
Something, yeah. Yeah, and less wet sounds next time.
Yeah, that too. I guess we can go with that as well. And please, less wind. Here's one of our final categories, Patrick. Can we survive this horror film? I'm going to start this category by saying, yes, I could survive this horror film for one reason. I'm not dumb enough to put myself in these situations and not, again, one of the reasons why I adore the Blair Witch Project is they give you a reason why they can't get out. They lose their map. They get lost in the woods. In Hell House, again, going back to Hell House LLC, they have a vested interest in this business. They're putting their life earnings into building this haunted house. You wouldn't want to get out either. You wouldn't just abandon that and say, oh, you know what, it's kind of scary, I'm going to lose my entire life savings and just leave. No, you would stick around to that thing burns to the ground because you have a vested interest. I wouldn't stick around. If I'm in the middle of the desert and I see some dude on the horizon holding an axe one night, or I find weird,
Time to go.
I'm done. I'm out. We'll find a new desert. We'll film it in the backyard, or so we'll film it in somebody's backyard that looks like a desert, but it's actually somebody's backyard. I'm out. So yes, I would survive this because I wouldn't stay.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I would not make the choices when the shit finally hits the fan an hour into this movie. I'd be happy to leave. I'd be like, hey, pack it up, we're going. And would I survive it even on its premise? Yes, I would. The documentation would just be better. Like I don't know why Robbie Zagoric was such a bad camera person and a music video director at the same time. That part's completely baffling. But I digress. I spend a lot of time out in the desert. Actually, it's like part of my job. Like I go out all the time. I just spent 10 days in the Mexican desert not too long ago. Scary world. I don't speak Spanish. There's not a lot of lodging. Somehow I come out the other end just fine, unscathed. Like this is a no-brainer. Never mind the fact that a guy standing with an axe on top of the hill, I'm out of there. Like immediately, we'll shoot this in Eileen's backyard. It's really nice. She got a lot of flowers.
Yeah, and that again, that goes back to my point. Like, give me again every good found footage film when things escalate, they give me a reason to stick around. Again, Paranormal
Exactly.
Activity, it's their house, they live there. They're not just going to
Yeah.
abandon their house. Again, Hell House LLC. I don't want to keep repeating myself, but I'm just again, Blair Witch is
Yeah.
brilliant. You're lost in the woods. They give you a reason. They give you a reason why you can't get out. You're lost.
They want to get out. They can't.
They can't. They try desperately to get out, and they
Yeah.
can't. This one, they give you no. They're filming a music video. You can film it anywhere. You want to film it in the desert? Great. Go to a different desert. If I'm in the middle of the Mojave Desert, also, don't they set this thing up at the beginning that they're in Jersey, and so they fly all the way to the Mojave Desert?
Something like that. Yeah.
Do this? Okay, so are there not like? It's just again, it confounds me because the choices they make no sense, and then when things get really weird, get out. When you start hearing weird sounds dude, just get out. Leave. Leave.
Or try to leave and have it fail. That's actually genuinely scary.
Yeah, if you want to leave,
That would be genuinely scary if they
someone stole your car.
someone stole. Yeah, right. You see the axe. Where's the car?
Yeah.
Oh my God, the car. Like, wow, that would have been a great escalation.
Or you get to the car, and I'm just giving you an example. Like, they found the weird axe in the middle of the thing. What if they go to the car and they find the axe in the engine? Something I know that turns into a slasher, but I'm just saying, like, give me a reason why you're trapped there.
I love that. Golly, it's so simple.
The phones, like, they start the movie with a 911 call. Did no one think to call anybody and like let them know what's going on here? Like what's happening? Like
it also seems that the phone call never connects into the movie either, which is weird.
Which is weird. That's what I said at the beginning. Like at the end, they didn't even use that. Like you don't even know when did they make the call? Who made the call? How did they make the call?
But I love that.
And also, like I said, I know I keep going back to the technological thing, but if you're filming this movie in 2022 and it comes out in 2023 or whatever, we're in an age where we have cell phones. Everyone would have their phones out with their cameras and lights on. We all do that. It's second nature.
Yeah.
When you're in a dark situation, you turn on the light on it's just what we do now. To believe that nobody would do that they would all just depend on this one guy with his weird shitty camera to film everything, and no one would be panicking and like, we got to go. Like, there's none of that.
If at every turn Robbie and company made a logical choice to escape and that escape didn't work, you'd have a really good scary movie on your hands.
Yeah.
If at every turn they made the right decision, it's like that's the Achilles heel of this movie is that they're not even making decisions. They're literally flitting through the whole thing. And so there's nothing scary about that. But if they tried to make the right decision and that didn't work for them, that's actually scary.
And also, they're filming a music video. This is real first world problems. Like, you're filming a music video. You could just film it somewhere else. Like,
yeah, you can just pack up and leave.
Yeah, again, you're not giving me a reason to believe. Again, I know I keep going back to Blair Witch Project. They were filming a documentary on the Blair Witch. They have a reason to put themselves in these terrifying, scary woods and situations trying to track down evidence, and then they get lost.
Mm-hmm.
It works. It all works. It all makes sense why they're there, why they're stuck there, why they continue to be there. All that makes sense. None of that happens in this film. And that's why I say, like, the whole, like, could we survive? Yeah, because I wouldn't be there. The first night there, you know what? Just get out. Like, if you're in a desolate area where there's no cell reception and there's no, communication and you start seeing weird images and sounds outside your tent, just get the fuck out.
Yeah.
Leave. I don't believe you that you wouldn't leave. I don't believe that you would. I don't believe that you would just stay around and act like nothing happened.
How about that one scene that's a blatant ripoff of the Blair Witch, where like someone's scratching at the outside of the tent,
yeah,
and they're just observing it, like they don't freak out and start leaving. They just like listen to the like against the tent, and they're just like, okay, we're watching that. Yeah. What? Like what is happening right now?
At that point, you deserve what you get. Like at this point, my sympathy's gone out the window for you because you shouldn't have to be there. Like they use the music video as the premise why they're filming. But again, that's first world problems, Patrick. This isn't a documentary about the desert. If they were going out there to film a documentary on the weird Axeman in the desert, maybe you figure out why they stuck around. Look, they just got evidence of the Axeman in the desert.
Sure.
But they're not there for that. They're there to film the music video. By the way, they filmed the music video for about 10 minutes, this whole thing. Like, that's the whole, they're out there for this whole time. And the one scene in the desert where the girl's walking through and the wind's blowing, that's the one scene of them filming the music video.
I'm banging my head against the microphone. The lack of logic. I'm tired, Damon. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. This movie exhausted me to my core.
It did. Last category, we already kind of answered it, but it's kind of tradition. We have to answer it. Is it scary? No, it's not scary.
No.
It's not scary. It's not exhilarating. It's not any of the weird $5 words people want to bust out for this film. For me personally, didn't do any of that. It wasn't visceral. It wasn't, mind-bending horror. None of that for me. If it's for you, kudos. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and I hope you absolutely love it. And I want to be clear, I hope everyone that listens to this doesn't just suddenly stop and not go watch this movie. I want you to go watch it. I want you to experience this.
Go tell me why I'm wrong. I want to know. I genuinely want to know.
Please tell me why I'm wrong. I love it. I have zero problem with that. But I have a hard time believing anyone's going to convince me otherwise, because it wasn't scary. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't a story. Again, this feels like a film that should just be shown at an art museum for the last 50 minutes. The first hour, as you said, cut it out, because it really plays no bearing whatsoever on the last 50 minutes.
No, I would miss nothing if that first hour was out. And lastly, I want to be very clear. I wish Robbie Banfitch all the best. I do. I'm not. That's not fucking lip service. He's a filmmaker. He's doing it. I wish him all the best. And I hope he finds a lot of success in this business. And I won't be revisiting the Outwaters anytime soon.
Yeah, me either. So again, like I said, to each their own. This is just not for me. And as I said, I'm with you. I mean this sincerely. I hope Robbie Banfitch finds an entire incredible career and he makes 1,000 movies that are amazing and wins awards and all that kind of stuff. His first film, though, The Outwaters, it's just not for me. You didn't make this film for me, and that's okay. That's completely okay. But I'm not your audience. I'm just not your audience for this film.
We were the wrong guys.
Yep. That's our show for this week, folks. As we mentioned, we got a lot of new films coming up in the coming weeks, so we're going to be reviewing a lot of good stuff. Cocaine Bear is coming up. We've got Scream 6, of course, coming out. Evil Dead Rise is coming out soon. Renfield is a horror comedy we're going to review, so we got a lot of new films coming out, so stay tuned for all of that. Make sure you check us out on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music. And of course, as I mentioned at the top of the show, you can also now find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Rewind of the Living Dead. Please subscribe to us on there. We're trying to build our subscriber base. We were very late to the party on YouTube, but we're trying to build that up. So please support us over there on YouTube as we continue building that audience. If you got questions, comments, movies you'd like us to review, we got a lot of great suggestions for films to review recently on Instagram, Facebook, and through email. Please send us your suggestions. There's a movie you want us to review, something you want to talk about on the show, please send it to us. You can email us at rotlivingdead@gmail.com. That's rot. livingdead@gmail.com. And you can find us on all of our social media platforms. Just search Rewind of the Living Dead on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Send us messages. I mentioned we got a message on Instagram recently. Someone sending us a movie suggestion. Somebody sent us a suggestion on Facebook Messenger recently. So we got a lot of great suggestions. Please send those over to us. We love taking your suggestions and comments on the show. Please, please, please send those over. If you love The Outwaters, send us a message and tell us why. I genuinely mean that. I'd like to know why people...
I want to read it on the air.
Absolutely. So send us those comments as well. And you can also follow us on our own personal social media. I am at Damon Martin, and you are?
At Director Patrick.
I want to say a big thank you, as always, to everyone that tunes into the show. We'll be back next week with more Rewind of the Living Dead. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you then.
Peace.